Hey soccer friends, I just want to give a shout out to our partner, Team Player. They are changing the game on how you find the perfect soccer team for your player. Parents, this means no more endless social media scrolling to find information on teams. With Team Player, everything you need to know is just a few clicks away. It's simple, straightforward, and lets you find the best coach and team for your player without any of the usual headaches. And coaches, we all know how tough it can be to get your team noticed, but when you subscribe to one of Team Player's team plans, you instantly get access to set up an online team profile that allows you to reach more potential players and showcase what your team is all about. It's super easy and lets players and parents see why your team could be the right fit for them. And if you sign up using the promo code PITCH, you can try any team plan free for 1 month. So whether you're managing a team or searching for one, come on over to www.teamplayer.us. That is TEAMPLAYR.US. And come give Team Player a look. Family-owned Soccer Innovation is your go-to source for top quality equipment. Whether you're a player, a supportive family member, or a dedicated coach, they have everything you need to elevate your game. For players, their innovative equipment are designed to boost your skills and performance on the pitch. From their agility cones to their portable goals, they have you covered. And family members, they offer durable equipment that's built to last because we know your support is critical to your player. Coaches, trust me, they can provide the equipment you need to run effective training sessions and shape the next generation of soccer players. Visit Soccer Innovations at soccerinnovations.com to start elevating your game with them. And if you use the code PITCH, PITCH, you can receive up to 10% off your next order. Hello and welcome back to Chat by the Pitch. This is Ian Babcock, your host. I first have to start off, this episode is one of my longer episodes, and it's done purposely because there's so much exciting things happening in the next 2 weeks in our women's team here for the USL Super League. I had Amber Brooks this week, and I didn't want to cut the episode in 2 weeks because it needs to be one piece. So this is a long episode for me, and I hope you all get a chance to listen to it all and truly enjoy it. She shares so many great things with you all as parents to listen to, and if your players are listening, she has a lot of great advice. So let's start this chat and head to the pitch.
My name is Amber Brooks, and I am captain and a defensive midfielder with Dallas Trinity FC.
So let's start off with the very basics here and looking at your playing history, and give me a high level viewpoint of you as a soccer player here in Dallas playing for the Dallas Trinity, because that is our connection right now, is the Dallas Trinity and everything you're doing with them in the current state. And so share a little bit about Dallas Trinity, and we'll start there.
Yes, Dallas Trinity is a brand new club and a brand new league, the USL Super League. I actually was maybe one of the first players to find out that the Super League was happening. It would have been about 3 years ago now, because I'm good friends with Amanda Vandervoort, the commissioner. We go way back to my youth days. We have like similar mentors and friends. And I was actually in Florida with the Washington Spirit, and she lives in Tampa. She just left FIFPro and was hired by the USL, and I was like, hey, let's grab lunch. And she was like, oh, I'm actually like, I came back to be president of this new women's league we're starting and want to bounce some ideas off you and all that. The seed was planted February of 2022, honestly. And then last year, or gosh, more than a year ago, the fall of 2023, I was a free agent or heading into the next season. And I again reached out to Amanda and was just like, hey, the Super League happening, because it was supposed to kick off in August 2023 and it got pushed back. She's yeah. And I said, be honest with me. What clubs would you recommend? Like, you're obviously the commissioner, you have the inside scoop. And she mentioned Dallas to me. And obviously, having played in Houston, I was somewhat familiar with the state of Texas. And so basically, in January, February, I reached out to Trip Neal actually on LinkedIn. And I actually reached out to him more intrigued about wondering if they had hired a general manager or an assistant general manager. Because at that point, I was weighing my options about playing or retiring and getting a front office job. And he was like, "Oh, we've actually hired a GM," which ended up being Chris Petroselli. And Chris wants to know, do you want to play? And so I was like, all right. Yeah, I'm not like against playing. I just was using that time to explore other options and see what made sense. Because for a lot of my career, I've done a lot of moving around, and I was just at the point, especially in my personal life, where I was like, all right, like this needs to be a move that's best for me, my now fiance, and what we want for our future. So I wasn't willing to just sign with any team just for the sake of playing longer. So talked to Trip a while. I knew Chris through him coaching in the NWSL and college and everything. We had similar people that we knew in the game, so I knew he knew his stuff and was going to be a good GM. And so honestly, without even knowing who the head coach was or whatever other players were being signed, I was pretty sold on the project. I didn't play in the NWSL the first year. I was drafted, but I chose to play in Germany instead, but came back to the NWSL in 2014. So more or less since the beginning days of the NWSL, I'd already done the new league and getting it going. So I was like, oh, do I have the energy in me? Like a new league and a new team, like it's a full-blown project. It's not going to be pretty a lot of times. But I've really enjoyed getting to know the Neals and their mentality about it and their perspective. And yeah, I was just like, let's do it. Let's move to Dallas. And yeah, it's been great. I think if you asked anyone in the ownership or players or staff, like if we would be happy with where we're at, certainly on the field, being in second place, I think definitely happy. I think we've got some exciting new signings coming in. There'll be a big one tomorrow that I won't spoil here. And yeah, I think off the field, I'm speaking with Charlie and Tripp, who I know you'll talk to. Would we love to have more butts in the seats at the Cotton Bowl? We for sure. But I think all in all, considering the club's been up and running like in a physical sense since May, June, things are actually going pretty well.
I think it's great that you're coming here not just as a player, but trying to work your way into the other side of the game and learning. I guess you probably have a great insight on how the Super League's set up and how the Neal family is doing everything now. And looking at now being here, you guys have had some phenomenal talent come into town. You guys were hit with some injuries this past year, and it doesn't help. But you all have been so successful through all that, and now I know you are all going through what I would call the mid-season growth spurts, and have some players going off to college or whatever the case may be now, or going back off their loans. I don't follow it enough to know the details. I just know players are moving around some, and this second half of your season looks like you guys are on a great trajectory for the rest of the season for being in second place. Are you all excited for that to be going on and ready for it to hit the ground running? I know that you said you're already in training sessions and whatnot. So are you all ready for the next, I think, what is it, 12 games?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it almost like this is our winter preseason, but it almost feels like our first preseason together because we didn't have our coaching staff. We didn't have our strength and conditioning coach. It was just Chris and Nick trying to get by. In a lot of ways, we missed out on having that summer preseason. And again, that's another thing I think when you take that into consideration, like where we're at in the table and the performances we've had is we can be very happy about the fact our coach wasn't in place until the third or fourth game of the season. And yeah, we've had loan players come in and out. Again, the player we're announcing tomorrow, everyone should be very happy with. And I know we're getting a couple of other loan players from the NWSL to join us ahead of our first game. Yeah, I think we've strengthened the roster, honestly. For the second part, I think that's part of the beauty, again, of the Super League and the calendar and how it works out is the second part of the season aligns with when girls are finishing and graduating early. So I think quite a few teams have strengthened their roster. I was glad that our club took the initiative to not just rest on our laurels and say, yeah, we've done well with what we have. They've bumped up our strength, and again, losing a couple players to injury and some players not returning on loan. But I think, again, to be announced tomorrow, everyone will be really pumped about that. And then the loan players that'll be announced in a couple of weeks. But yeah, we're 3 weeks in, started our third week of preseason today. Everything's going really well. And it's nice to also not have so much change, I will say. Again, I think we finally are used to our coaching staff and the way they run trainings and the way they see the field and their philosophies. And then it's nice to have some continuity in terms of players and not have a ton of, we have a few trialists, but not a ton, and not a bunch of new signings where you have to like totally rebuild chemistry. It's just like adding layers to what we built in the fall. So yeah, in that sense, I think we're really happy with where we're at, all things considered.
Now, as you're getting ready for this season, I'm going to ask the very generic question here. Where can we find all your information? How can we watch you all and support you all? Where do we buy tickets? Where do we buy merchandise so we can wear it around town and have it on and really support our local team and our local women's team that's here that is at a high level soccer that we don't get to see often in our community enough? And anything else you'd like to share for the Dallas Trinity side of things?
So all our home games are played at the Cotton Bowl, which doesn't get more iconic than that. And I've played in 4 different leagues worldwide on youth national teams, games all across the world. And the surface at the Cotton Bowl, at least from a player side, is one of the top 5 that I've ever played on. It is a great atmosphere. It's obviously massive and we don't fill it out, but I will say, like, especially when the band's there and the way that the fans are configured, it gets loud for us players, and it really does feel like a very professional environment. And yeah, we've got a great website. You can buy those tickets. It'll take you to it'll forward you onto the Fair Park website where you can buy tickets. They're all very affordable, is what I would say. And again, you get a lot of access, which I think is not normal for professional athletes. Like, the action is right there. We're always very good as players. We're cognizant that like people took time out of their day to come watch us play. And so not only just performing well on the field, but we always make sure we take plenty of time after games to go sign autographs and take pictures. That's not something you see a ton of, especially in male sports. We really appreciate our fans and want to make sure. There's usually fireworks after almost every game, so that's cool too. There's always some free merch. I think our merch is by far the best in the Super League, and probably better than most NWSL teams, honestly, in terms of design and creativity and the colorway. So definitely want to encourage you to open your wallet to some merch for sure.
I will have to say I love the colors that you all have picked. They did a really great job at figuring out how to promote Dallas Trinity, and I'm excited. My goal is to get to a game this spring with my at least my son and my daughter and my wife. So the 4 of us go. I can't wait to actually see it. We'll probably go to a day game if I can convince everyone to it. And I wish you guys the best of luck in your season. So now the other half of this, or majority of this interview, will be more about you as the individual and you as the player. Give me the beginning for you. Where did you start playing? What age do you start playing? And we can work our ways forward and really try to give guidance to inspiring athletes that will hear this, and parents, give them some guidance on where to take their players and what they'll have to do to be an Amber Brooks of the world and be ready for the next phases of their life.
So I started playing soccer when I was 4. Actually, cool about both my parents played in college. My dad played at Lemoyne in upstate New York. And then fun fact about my mom, she actually played at Ashland University in Ohio, and they had just passed Title IX and they didn't have a women's team, so they had to allow her on the men's team. And she mostly practiced with them versus getting into like playing actual games. But I've got a whole scrapbook of pictures of her in shorts and t-shirt going up against hairy men with no shirts on and everything. That's pretty cool to say about both my parents. And then I have 2 older brothers that are 10 and 7 years older than me. So they played every sport. Soccer was one of the main ones. So I was that annoying little sister that wanted to do everything they did and thought I was a boy for most of my childhood and just wanted to keep up with them. My mom started me rec league in New Hope, Pennsylvania when I was 4. I joined my first travel team. It was actually a boys team when I was 8 or 9. Again, like they didn't have a girls travel team in my hometown. So it was with the boys, but again, that's really all I knew, so I was fine with it. And then I joined my first girls team. I kept playing on the boys because the boys team was a year older than my age group. I played a year up with the boys, and then I joined a girls team that was like a 30-minute drive when I was like 11. And I played on both the teams, and I honestly credit playing. I played with boys until I was 14, basically, until high school, and I credit that with a lot of, I guess, my physical nature and my, ability to be a strong player and aggressive and just learn that side of the game. And yeah, when I did ODP, which I know doesn't exist as, at least the same as it was for me. ODP was one of the most amazing things that I ever did. I went on like multiple trips across the world, and it's how I was identified for the U14 national team, and a lot of coaches that made like a big impact on me I met through Eastern Pennsylvania ODP and then Region 1, some that I like still talk to today. And yeah, so I was identified at an early age for the youth national team. I played in the under-17 World Cup. The first ever Women's World Cup was held in New Zealand in 2008. I was captain of that team. We lost in the championship to North Korea in double overtime. And so a couple of my teammates from the fall who are now in college that were on the under-17 team, I said, like 16 years ago, I was in the first ever U17 World Cup, and like that really aged me having that conversation with them. And I did one better than they came back, and I was like, all right, like bronze, that's pretty good, but I got silver. Those pesky North Koreans are tough to beat. And then yeah, I joined a great club team my freshman year. I actually drove an hour and a half each way. But again, this national team coach that I had was like, Amber, this is going to be the best coach for you, the best environment. And I really think that's what you need to reach the goals that you have. So, of course, my parents were whatever. It had to be my decision. But from a very young age, I was 8 for the 99 World Cup. And that was probably the first aha moment I had where I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. Like I want to win a World Cup. And I had no concept of what that meant or how to get on the national team, but I just saw it and I was like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. And then the WUSA started in 2000 and Philadelphia had a team. My parents got season tickets and I went to all the games and I joined their youth select team and I was just all about it. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a pro soccer player. And I was very fortunate to have parents and family and teachers and friends that supported that dream. They didn't call me crazy or anything like that. Yeah, so high school, college recruiting started pretty early, not as early as it does these days. It's gone insane, but UNC was always my dream school. It was the women's soccer school. And I did my due diligence though. My parents were like, hey, you might think you want to go there, but we're gonna make you research and explore. We're gonna visit plenty of other schools. So probably went on 10 to 12 unofficial visits all across the country and some multiple times. And my parents were adamant that I engaged in all the conversations with the coaches. I was emailing them. I was calling them. It wasn't them choosing a college for me. And they even made me, like, when I had decided, like, respond to every coach and say, thank you for your, and that was like a lot of emails. It came down to a final 3 and actually, funny enough, I didn't love my first visit to UNC. I think I had chalked it up in my mind to be this like magical place, and it is, trust me, but I don't know, it just didn't go as well as I thought it was going to, and I wavered a little bit thinking, oh, I don't know, do I want to go to UNC? And thankfully I did. Probably the best decision I've made in my life. So yeah, went to UNC and as a freshman won a national championship. I think Lucy Bronze and I were the 2 freshmen that started most of the season and in the national championship, and then won again my senior year to cap off my college career. And again, they had the WSA that folded, the WPS that folded. And so heading into my senior year of college, there was no professional league in the U.S. And so I was fully convinced that I was going overseas. So to prepare for it, I actually took German 101 because Ali Krieger and Ashlyn Harris and some of the marquee players in the U.S. were playing in the German league. So I thought this would be a good place. And yeah, after the national championship, Bayern Munich reached out and were like, hey, I think they actually knew a youth national team coach that I had played for, and they'll vouch for you. Usually the European teams want you to go on trial before they sign a foreign player, and there was already a couple of Americans playing for them. I was like, yeah, what the heck? Like, I'd love to go play Bayern Munich. It doesn't get much bigger than that, really. I signed with them, and all along the same time, news was coming out like, oh, the NWSL is going to start, and I had a coach that was like, just enter your name in the draft because, say, you dislike it in Germany, you can't play in the NWSL unless you've entered your name in the draft. You'd have to wait the entire year. So I was like, all right, fine. So I was already playing in Germany, and they held the NWSL draft, and all of a sudden my phone's like blowing up, and I was drafted by the Portland Thorns, and I'm confused because I'm like, well, I'm already playing on this team. Do I have to go back? And so basically they just effectively drafted my rights. So when I did want to return to the NWSL, they had first right to me to negotiate with me. I love Germany. Looking back at it now, I don't regret coming back when I did, but if I could have stayed another 6 months to a year, I think developmentally wise, like that would have been probably the best decision. But back then, US soccer was very much pressuring its players to play in the NWSL. Obviously, they were subsidizing a big portion of it. And I had been called into a few full team camps. And of course, I was trying to make the 2015 World Cup roster. Like, I didn't want to jeopardize that. So I was like, sure, if you want me to play in the NWSL so you can see me against other US players, like, fine. If that's what I have to do to make the national team roster, I'll do it. So I came back. Portland had just won the championship. So, of course, sure, I'll sign with you. And no joke, like, after the first game that season, the national team coach was fired. And yeah, so didn't get called back into a camp. But yeah, and learned the hard way about a week ago, NWSL rules change where you can't be traded without, it has to be mutual consent. And in my 10 years in the NWSL, I was traded 3 times in the course of 1 year, all without my knowledge, and multiple times across the country. I've been waived. I've had to go in as a trialist, earn a contract. So I've run the gamut in the NWSL, but a lot of good experiences within that as well. I can't complain too much, but yeah. And then I find myself now playing in the Super League for Dallas Trinity.
You gave so much there, and it's so much to unpack. So let's go back to your youth. I think that's very key. I think this is the good trend that you see, or the typical trend for especially female players that make it to a very high level. They tend to play with boys for a certain stage, and I think they learn how to be more aggressive or more assertive, and then when they switch over back to the females, I could be completely wrong. I'm just watching the girls that I watch play. I'm watching my daughter when she plays against boys. My daughter's only 7, and it's fun watching her play against the boys because she'll go out there and treat them like it's her brother, and she'll run them over and push them and shove them and play a very physical game. It's teaching them how to go through that motion correctly. But for you, you attribute playing a year up. Playing a year up in boys is hard enough. So how did you view, or do you remember much of that phase of your life where you were playing? Do you think you were treated differently because you were a female, or do you think your teammates accepted you for who you were and you were just one of them?
Yeah, my teammates just accepted me. They were the same boys that, again, most of them were a grade ahead of me in school, but at our public school, the same boys I grew up elementary through middle. I played middle school boys soccer, and that was, I think, more of the hesitation was on parents' end, not mine, but theirs, because I was effectively taking a boy's spot. And so they put like a rule into place in our township that, like, if a girl was going to play with the boys, they had to be like starting 11 worthy, so that they weren't, it was bizarre. But yeah, that, I guess, looking at it from the boys' parents' point of view, like, no one wants to see their son sitting the bench when there's a girls team because a girl's taking his spot. But in terms of playing with the boys, they were just like a bunch of brothers to me. And they, again, I think because I held my own, there was never any second thoughts. There was never a conversation, whether it was like my parents or the coach or them, about, oh, like, I'm going to go easier on you or anything like that. I stopped playing with them basically when we went to high school, because I chose to go to a private school. And then I joined a club an hour and a half away. And it got to the point where, again, like, they were going through puberty, and it was beyond my physical capabilities. And we started playing some teams where, again, like, that was more the issue of when I played in actual games with them, there'd always be that boy or two on the other team that wanted to hurt me or didn't want to get showed up by me. It just got to that point where I was physically risking getting injured still playing with them. So then about freshman year, 14, 15 years old, that's when I was like, all right, got to stop playing with the boys on this level. Still wanted to train with them as much as I could, play pickup, but I wasn't like officially rostered with them anymore.
That I find that fascinating because as I watch a lot of the players here in Dallas, and since in my head, for whatever reason, I made it up that you were from Dallas, but you're not. You're from the East Coast, which is cool. And listening to what you have to say about it, and it's no different than here. I think we get stuck in our heads because where we live, it's not the same story elsewhere, but it is. It's always the top players, top female players. I'm going to use some players from locally. You have several young ladies on your squad that probably played with boys for a little bit. The one that stands out the most to me, and she's not affiliated with you yet, but I hope someday she will be, is Caroline Swan. She's a U15 or a U16 player, and she just last year stopped playing with the boys. And she was a starter, and she's one of these great, phenomenal players making the youth national team right now. And it's amazing watching these young players, these young ladies grow up and play. And at times they're more talented than the boys that are on the pitch. Sorry, parents, that's just the truth. And watching them progress, we've had a lot of young ladies from this area. You play with several academy young ladies, and I'm assuming most of them have either played up or played with boys. And you credit so much to that. And I feel like as heart-aching as this is, because I do have a daughter, you're put up with a different challenge than everyone else because of your gender. And I'm not trying to make this about gender, because you've broken that barrier, because look at you today and where you're playing. But even at a young age, we as parents need to be mindful that it's about the development of these players and nothing else. At the end of the day, eventually you'll see them split, but sometimes where they're at, the level of play is not efficient enough for them to truly develop. And from the sounds of it, you guys struggled with that, but as a player, it sounds like you did a pretty good job, partitioning that and allowing it not, from the sounds of it, it might affect you. Maybe you haven't just talked about it yet, but it sounds like it was part of your growth and your pathway that you took. And how did it persuade you to continue moving down the path that you were going on? Because that's a very intimidating thing, because like you said, they created rules where you had to be a starting 11 worthy to be on roster. So in those earlier years before you did go to an all-girls team, was there anything or any advice you'd give to parents and players to stand their ground and do what they need to do?
I just think, again, like, everything should be a case by case basis. And again, from a young age, I was strong and aggressive and had no fear. I think having two brothers that are that much older than me, and again, my mom always tells the story, I wanted to play baseball with them in the backyard with their friends, and they're like, okay, but we're not going to take it easy on you. Like, you have to keep up with us. We're not going to lower our level for you. And of course they like threw a ball, like when I catch it, like in front of my face, but it hits me in the eye and I go running in with a black eye, and my mom's like, they told you got to keep up like this if you want to play. So I think, for me, it was just, I think it really helped that, again, back then, early 90s, mid 90s, there weren't girls teams. So for me, it was really easy to just be like, otherwise I can't play, and you can't discriminate in that way. And then even now we're scrimmaging a boys team this weekend. So even at the professional level, I've probably scrimmaged more boys teams than I have other women's pro teams, just because, again, even at this level, like, it forces you to play quicker. You can't get away, like, physically. They're maybe not stronger at some of the ages we play, quicker, and you have to think faster and you have to play quicker because they'll punish you if not in the way that even professional girls wouldn't. Yeah, for me, I think it was just what I knew, and I think a lot of the boys that I played with, it was just what they knew, and from their point of view, they didn't want to get showed up by a girl, so they never took it easy. And from my point of view, I was one of them. I didn't know any better. But yeah, I think parents know their kids, and it's not for everyone. I'm sure, especially in this day and age, that things have drastically changed from when I was growing up. So I'm sure there's a lot more societal pressure and just social media and everything else that wasn't at play when I was growing up. It's not a one size fits all, like with a lot of things, but there's no, I can sit here and say it as a just turned 34-year-old pro women's soccer player that I will be challenged by these 16-year-old boys that we scrimmaged this weekend. And I have no problem saying that.
That's awesome. At least you have it going on with the right mindset. I think a lot of people have a warped view on things just because of how sports are, but at least you're willing to admit, showing humility, I guess might be the right way of going into this. Now, as you progressed, as you split from the boys team to your all girls team, how did you view the game? Because you said, I think I wrote down 14 years old. You stopped playing with the boys. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was when I joined the club team that was like an hour and a half away, world class, out of northern New Jersey. And the coach there, Cass Tamby, I still keep up with him today. To be fair, we were a girls team, but we played at the U18 level every year. I joined when I was 14, so I was playing 4 years up basically. But so I was the youngest. There was a few girls that were a year above me, and then the majority were juniors and seniors. But we always played at the U18 level because, again, our coach, we weren't playing against boys, but he playing up age groups is a challenge. But he always brought in boys to train with us, or full-blown men that were his friends and coaches would jump in, especially during the winter months when we were inside. I was still training with boys. I wasn't playing against them on the weekend or with them, but he was like adamant that, again, it was all about forcing us to play quicker and at a faster level, pass the ball, move the ball to a point where the ball always moves faster than the player. That was still very much a part of my training. So it wasn't like this huge adjustment. It was obviously the games. I wasn't competing against boys in games, but again, with the ODP and the youth national teams, like at that point I was used to girls, and it was nice because it didn't seem easier, but again, I felt like I could focus on maybe more of the technical aspects of the game because physically I was usually the strongest one. So that side wasn't really a factor. So now I felt like I could actually work on the technical and tactical side of things.
When you're looking at this as a whole, I look at it as two aspects. I've came to the realization, I shouldn't say always, I've came to the realization that in order to get better, even I don't care what age, what player you are, you have to play against older, stronger, more developed players. And it sounds like your coaches set you all up for success. I bet you all had a very high success rate, especially because if you're 4 or 5 players who are playing 3 to 4 years up, that lines a lot of success for them to get ready for the next phase. Was what age then, thinking through your process, did you finally pick that you were a defender, or did this change throughout your career from certain age groups, or did you knew in your mind, in your heart, in your soul that you were always a defender, or at one point in time did you think you were a striker or a goalie, whatever it may be?
Yeah, it changed. So I youth played all the positions. For most of my life, actually, I've been a defensive midfielder, so still on the defensive side. I played high school. A big reason why I went to the private school that I did was because they had such a good girls soccer program, and we were nationally ranked, won state championships every year. And I played center forward in high school. And it was still high school, but in high school terms, it was high level high school. Like we're talking like South Lake Carroll, like level, right? Like you're pumping out. I think my grade had 4 or 5 of us go D1. So it's still high school level, but it is the highest of high school level. And I was a center forward, and I scored 60 goals in 3 years that I played. And I was actually recruited by the University of Florida to play center forward. And I look back at it now and it's a joke, but also I'm like, dang, like maybe I should have played that position, because the strikers usually make the most money. And even in practice, like it's usually when coaches like are just getting to know me, and they say, and we play small sided or we do finishing drills, and I take it serious. Obviously, everyone should, but like I count my goals, like I keep track, and I want to be the best finisher on any given day. And usually after the coach can tell that, I was like, did you ever play like striker? And I'm like, yeah, I did. And then even I've had quite a few coaches that will throw me up to center forward if we need a goal with the last 10 minutes. And our coach did that actually. Our last game in the fall, got thrown up against Brooklyn the last 8 to 10 minutes to center forward and almost had an assist. Didn't quite get a goal, almost had an assist. Yeah, I think for me, even back then, like no one wants to play defense, like growing up, let's be honest. But again, being physical, being aggressive, like wanting to be better than everyone and win those individual battles, I was like, sure, I'll play defense. Like, I don't mind. And I wore around a t-shirt that said defense wins championships, offense sells tickets. So, as you get older, you realize, oh, maybe like financially and in terms of where my career even further could have been, might have made sense to progress as a forward. But I think for me, I love pressing people. I love tackling. I love 1v1 duels. Like in practice, most people hate it, and I'm like, I eat it up. Yeah, I think I just have kind of that defender and defensive mentality to me.
I find it fascinating just because I always like watching kids play, and you can always tell the ones where they should be playing and ones where they're being pushed to play because either a coach needs a position or that's where a player feels comfortable. And from the sounds of it, you didn't have that. You just wanted to be on the pitch, and you are willing to do whatever it takes from the personality that you have described of yourself so far. Looking through that, what would you say then was a driving factor? Was it the internal drive for you as an individual? Was it the support and camaraderie of your family and friends? What initially made you be you? I guess might be the best way of putting it, to be a strong, driven player. Because I'm trying to teach my soon-to-be 11-year-old son that he has to have that drive inside of him. I can want it all for him, but he has to have it. And I think at some age it finally clicks. And what was that age for you when it clicked? And what have you done to maintain that drive to be the best?
So the 99 World Cup was like a huge moment for me, watching the US win it, and that was probably the first time that I like verbalized to people like, "Oh, that's going to be me. Like that's what I want to do." But the first time I really probably say took control and told my parents like, no, this is what I fully want to commit to, is I was actually on the way back from indoor ODP, state ODP training, and the coach had pulled my mom aside and was like, look, again, I was playing up. I was 11 playing up with the U13s because that was the first age group. And he was like, look, like Amber has all of the physical skill set. You can tell she has the mentality, but she's lacking a little bit in terms of for where she wants to go in the technical area. And he's, if she can devote some time to that, whether it's getting like a personal trainer or just whatever, like she could go to college and beyond in this sport. And so my mom, I remember, had a conversation with me on the drive home and was like, hey, this coach really thinks you have it, but there's things that you need to work on, because it might not. I think my physical ability was masking. Again, I wasn't bad technically, but I wasn't where I needed to be in the future. And eventually that catches up with you. So she's, yeah, at 11, 12, you're stronger, you're faster than everyone else. But 13, 14, these girls will catch up. And what's going to separate you is your technical ability. And so your dad and I will find a trainer for you. Like, we will drive you around, pay for these lessons, but it has to be your decision. We're not going to like yank you out of the car. We're not going to like baby you. Like, this has to be like your full decision. And that I remember being like, no, like I want to commit myself to do this. Like I want to play in college. I want to be a pro. Like I'm willing to devote myself to this. So that was definitely a defining moment, I think, that I remember. And I wasn't perfect by any means. Like I had this great trainer, and I still talk to him today, and like he will tell you, like I'm such a perfectionist, and I just really struggle with not being perfect the first time. So like he would show me a technical pattern, and I normally, of course, you're 12 years old, like you're going to make mistakes, so you're not going to pick up on it, but my default was to like not try as hard, because then I had the excuse of, oh, I wasn't really trying. So yeah, I couldn't do it, but I wasn't giving full effort. So that's why, versus, no, you just aren't able to do it. And I'd get a little attitude and get lazy. And there was several times where he left me at the training field. Like my babysitter usually would drop me off and then come back an hour and a half later. And there were several times she'd come back and he had already left because I was had a bad attitude. And I'd be like, oh, he just left 2 minutes ago and I've been sitting there for 30 minutes. I think that perfectionist attitude has been great for the most part, but then I had to learn to, it's okay when you're learning to make mistakes. I always wanted to be the best, always wanted to be perfect at these things. So yeah, I think, again, like my parents, obviously you don't realize it at the time, but they were both high level executives in their jobs. And I had two older brothers that one had gone off to college, one went to private boarding school. So I was like an only child from about 10 on, which is why they could devote so much time to me. But still, like, you look back at the time commitment, the money, like you get a full ride to college, but they probably paid that in club dues and at private trainers and all these overseas trips and everything. Yeah, my parents were definitely the providers, but it was very much, and again, there were moments where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, blah, blah, and go ahead, mope in your room, and then tell me in 10 minutes that you're good and you want to keep going. Yeah, and again, I was very fortunate. Middle school, I had teachers that, there weren't really athletes that came out of my school district. It was pretty small, and then, yeah, no one had really aspired to be a collegiate athlete or be a pro athlete. And I was really fortunate that I still had teachers that they didn't laugh at me. They didn't tell me like, no, you can't be a pro soccer player. Get a real job. What do you really want to be? And those same teachers actually were the ones who encouraged me to go to this private high school because they thought it would be a better environment for me and my goals and what I wanted in life. Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be, whether it's my parents or coaches or just support system, always been supported. And if they thought I was crazy, they at least didn't tell me to my face. And looking back at it now, I think they could say it worked out pretty well. And the age I am, still kicking a ball.
It's amazing that you're still able to. Now, as you progressed, you played in high school, and I did a little research on you just because I need to make sure I had all the details. And you went off to UNC, and now you played, I think, is probably one of the most decorated coaches in women's soccer in the United States. And it will be a long time before someone fills those shoes. And looking at that, how was your college career now? Balancing the collegiate life of school and sports, how was that for you jumping into your freshman year? Because I'll be honest, most athletes can't handle that just because it's such a drastic change, because it's soccer for so many hours a day, then you have to go study and actually go to class, and there's no mom and dad. Hopefully by that point in time, and you obviously played pretty high level for your age and traveled the world, so there wasn't a lot of hand holding anymore, probably starting off at an early age for you. But how did you handle it all, and what advice starting that process would you give to parents or players that are getting ready to go to that next phase of their lives?
Yeah, I was lucky that I had like enough like youth national team and other involvement that the last time I got homesick was my first ever soccer camp, like sleepaway camp that I went to at 12, and I was so homesick. And then after that, it was like, all right, when can I go away? Like when so I'd already had that progression and that bit of being on schedule, on time, like early is on time is late. Like that stuck with me since I was like 14, because I had one coach that was like, if you're not 5 to 10 minutes early for a meeting, you're actually late. And I was like, all right, doesn't make sense, but that's how it works. Okay, so I still do that today. But I actually, too, on top of the transition to college is tough, Actually, my dad passed away suddenly a couple months before I went to college, so I was also dealing with that. And the senior class when I was a freshman was like unbelievable. We had 9 players that went on to play pro from that senior class. And so there wasn't like a ton of expectations, even though I was a top recruit. I knew that I was going to have to I wasn't necessarily going to start from day one, and I was going to have to learn from these players and kind of buy into the culture. And I think it's very hard to articulate, but and I hate throwing the word culture around, it's very overused these days, but what UNC women's soccer has is just, besides the winning, it's just very special. I think even they obviously won the championship this year, but even in the years that they didn't win, I think every player that's come out of there would say the same thing. And so, yeah, there's just something that was so like beautiful, honestly, about playing and wanting to win for the seniors at the time. There was like so much talent, but there was just that everyone was so bought in of like playing hard for each other. And I was just so fortunate to be in that environment for the 4 years. And I think honestly, it was almost a harder transition becoming a pro after being in that environment, not competitively and everything else was versed and set up to succeed. But what you learn quickly is like professional, like it's your job and there's consequences and it's not this family feel. Like it's great if your team does have that feel to it, but it's a job. Coaches' jobs are on the line, your job's on the line. It's not, you can never replicate that collegiate environment at the pro level. And that was probably the hardest part about becoming a professional, was more the mentality shift and the fact that, yeah, you might be teammates with this person this season trying to win a championship together, and then you're traded or the coach is fired or something, and it's like a whole different environment and rebuild. But yeah, I think choosing to go to UNC was the best decision I've made. Whether I'd won championships or not, I would say the same thing. And then, yeah, like for me, again, as much as my parents were very supportive of what I was doing athletically, they were super demanding academically. I just developed this mentality of, again, part of the perfectionist in me, but if you're going to do something, you might as well try your hardest and be the best you can be. So for me, I wanted to get straight A's and I wanted to be a scholar athlete. And again, like you had to figure out how to, whatever the time management, I guess, a little bit. But for me, it was just, if I wanted to do these things, soccer, even in high school, I missed like 100 days of high school because I had the Youth World Cup and camps and stuff. And there's some teachers were like, oh, can she do this? And I was like, I always turned in my work on time, if not early. Like I always got A's on time. So like they couldn't complain because I was doing everything. And I just carried that into college because I was like, I have to go to class. I want to earn a degree. I might as well try and have the highest GPA trying to do. I think my parents pushed me enough. I came home with 1 B+ on a report card in high school, and my dad chewed me out, and I was like, all right. And for me, getting A's was, I think in middle school and high school, it's instilled by your parents. But by the time I got to college, I was just like, I want to get straight A's because I want straight A's. And I hated that, oh, like dumb jock analogy. No, like I can win championships on the field and be an academic All-American. You can do both. And for me, it was just always, if you're going to do something, you might as well put maximum effort in. And it doesn't always work out. There's sometimes things you can't control. But in terms of studying and grades, I was just fixated on, and I also wanted to graduate in 3.5 years so I could start my pro career. When I'm set on something, there's not much I don't require much discipline. I just, was dead set on winning championships, and I wanted to graduate summa cum laude, and that's what I did.
From the sounds of it, I want to say you didn't have a choice. From the sounds of it, you had great parents that were there supporting you and had high expectations because they knew who you were as an individual. Do you find that to contribute to much of your success? You talked about your dad cheering out. I'd be happy if I got a B in any class going through high school, and that's a different story for a different day. But I think your parents knew who you were and your potential. So how do you view your success as the individual that you are versus the driving factor of your parents? Because I think parents need to understand this, that it's the athlete that makes it. It's not the parent. And from your perspective, your parents understood that because they both played at a high level for themselves, and they knew what you had to do to achieve your goals from the sounds of it. With that being said, do you think they set you up for success by helping you curate your personality, who you were, and then when you got to college, you were set because of what the foundation they set for you to be success?
Yeah, I think that's it. Like for me, and a big reason why I will not coach in the future is because of the parents. I do some private and small group training on the side, and as much as when I first start working with a girl, am I interested? Does our relationship work? Is she interested? I'm also judging the parents. And there's been players that I like, but I can't deal with their parents and I won't work with them. So for me, and I have my fiance's sister was a college coach and she stopped because it just, the girls coming through that I think I could go on and on about parenting. Again, not having been a parent, it's probably easy for me to say, but yeah, I've seen parents can be the reason a kid makes it or doesn't, at least early on. But then if they haven't ingrained and taught their child like how to live in the real world, eventually I think it catches up. And again, I don't want to put like the pro leagues on blast, but there's this whole kind of agenda toward signing like the youngest teenager you can has gotten like out of control. And I will say part of my attraction to the Super League when I was having these early conversations was the fact that we can have academy players that retain their college eligibility and can still play with us. And I think if I was a teenager now, I'd be begging my parents to let me be an academy player for Dallas Trinity or Tampa Bay or whoever, because that is, I look at these players and I'm like, you guys are like so lucky. Like, I just watched these games when I was your age, and to be able to be in that daily training environment, sometimes playing in games, like this is going to help you immensely, just even if you don't play beyond college, like just that exposure. So, but again, I'm not here to complain about the NWSL or compare the two. The amount of teenagers that have been signed in the NWSL in the past 3 years, it's far too high, in my opinion, in terms of what's best for their development. And again, like our academy players can train with us during the week. Some of them still train with their clubs as well. They have to manage that load. And then some games they're starting or they're sub, or if they're not needed on the roster that weekend, they go play with their club. It's like the best of both worlds versus this NW. There's no academy teams, there's no games. And when you're developing, you need game after game, and I just don't see it being the best. So yeah, I think for me, my parents probably were still crazy at some points, but it was again always they were there to facilitate and to open their checkbook and drive the car and have those, you know, conversations where sure you want to do, because they didn't want to waste their time and money. And they, again, I'd be lying if I didn't say at certain points, as it felt like my mom's vicariously living through me, of course. But at the end of the day, there's never been a question, or there's been days, but in general, it's always been my decision and my love for the game. And I think even more than how much I love playing, like I love competing. So maybe it could have been another sport, but I just genuinely love like the daily process of showing up, training, getting better, and then having a game where you can apply what you learned and get and winning. Like I love winning. It could be the dumbest thing, the smallest drill, and I will be so upset if I don't win, and it could ruin the rest of my day. So yeah, I think again, it was probably much easier for parents when I was growing up to balance, because there wasn't all these external factors, and there was no thought about should Amber go to college or should she go pro? That wasn't even a thought. And I think parents ask me all the time now, oh, what would you, if you were a teenager now and you had the option of going pro or going to college, what would you do? And again, it's hard to know, but I always advocate for at least going into college for at least a semester or 2 semesters, and you can always leave. But that opportunity to, and I know maybe theoretically some of these players are making enough that they can pay for their own college degree at some point, but again, like that environment that I had at UNC, like I have never had at the professional level. And I'm not trying to be negative about it. It's just like you can't replicate it when there's money and there's jobs on the line. So if I had not had that experience at UNC, and again, it's different for everyone depending on where they go, but like I would not be the player or person I am today. So for me, I can't even imagine not having at least attempted that experience at college.
As a parent, I do live vicariously through my kids just because I never got a chance to play soccer and I have absolutely fallen in love with the game. That being said, you're sounds like you have a very typical, I would call a average family growing up playing sports and your experiences. Now, moving a little bit farther forward in college, you played at UNC, like the home of so many great women's national team players, so many great dominant players in the beautiful game. How did that stepping on that campus, like you said, you built it up in your head to be something else, and moving there and going through college and balancing everything and then playing like I will give him credit for who he is in my mind with all my research, playing for one of the best coaches ever in the collegiate game. I don't care men or women's, I will give him both sides of the equation. And how did that shape your journey more? Because you don't know which way direction you would have gone if you had the options like you would today, but how did that shape who you were as a player? Because those 4 years can be instrumental for almost everyone who I've ever talked to that played at a collegiate level. How was it playing for him? And was it, from the outside looking in, was it as, I wouldn't say glamorous, but worth every moment and worth every chance that you got? Or was it a learning curve for you to go to the next level, to be pushed because he knew how to do it and he was successful doing it? Or was there something else in the background that helped you get through that phase of your life?
Yeah, so Anson is the best coach of all time, male, female, this country, any other country. I still have a very close relationship with him. I will actually be doing a dance with him at my wedding this summer because that's how the impact that he has had on me. To be honest, you go to UNC, not obviously you have a bunch of great players there, but not everyone that goes and plays there wants to play professionally and is on that track. But starting freshman year, he wants to know, okay, do you want to play professionally? And he'll give his input. Do you think you can or not? Is it realistic? And then, yeah, just being in the environment, it wasn't it wasn't that hard of a transition for me. Again, I think because I had done the youth national team, I'd always played up. I think getting to know him and his coaching methods and being in that competitive cauldron, what they call it, I think it was the first time where I felt like I had to compete at the highest level every day because you were ranked every day and ranked at the end of the week and at the end of the semester. And again, being the competitive person I was, I wanted to be high up there. And so I think I learned a lot about what it meant to show up to train at a high level every day, which I think very much helped me at the professional level. And I think if you had to ask players coming out of college what the hardest part is, yeah, the speed of play. It's faster. Everyone's strong and fast, but it's a long season compared to the collegiate season, a pro season is. And there's like in college, you train like twice a week and then you got 2 games and you're just recovering and preparing. And there's not a whole lot, especially in the fall, of like actual practice time where you're developing. And in the pro game, we have 4 or 5 practices a week and then a game. And there's more of a tempo and there's a lot more time to actually compete and practice and develop and work on your game. And a lot of players coming out of college really struggle with the fact that like you have to show up at a high level every day, or you should. And I think consistency is a huge thing that I see that is lacking because again, like they can get away with it in college. And I think at UNC, like I could never get away with not showing up. Like I could not show up and play at a high level. Plus, trust me, I did plenty of times, but I didn't rank well that day, and I didn't like that feeling, and I didn't like seeing my name low on the charts. I learned like accountability and consistency, I think, that has really helped me at the pro level. And again, plenty of players get away with it even at the pro level, but for me, I think one of my greatest attributes, if like physical aside, is my consistencies. I might not be this like star flashy player every game, but you get a high level of consistency which if you have enough of that, you have the ability to win every game. And whether it's lack of injury or just training at a high level, being able to put my body through a lot of stress and still come out and compete at a high level. So I think that's a lot of what I learned at UNC was like there's every Tuesday we lined up and ran fitness, and we played a game on Thursday and Sunday. And they don't do that anymore because methods have shown that it's probably not the best way to go about things, but like that builds a resilience in you, and it builds a camaraderie amongst the team in a sense that I'm doing all this fitness, no other team is doing this, like we're going to kill them on the weekend. And yeah, I think again from Anson is the best coach, the best leader, and he just has this innate ability to understand the female psyche and how best to coach females and how like what buttons to push without going too far. Sometimes, of course, like every human you do, but and training, to be honest, I trained with them all last spring from February till when I moved out here in beginning of June. And again, I was contemplating, do I keep playing, do I not? And to be honest, like if it had not been with him in that environment, like I found like a new love for the game, and I was like, wow, like I love being in this environment. I wish I could have this at the pro level. And he really pushed me. Amber, you still got it in you. You can do this. Keep going. Don't retire now. And so even then, 12 years removed, have so far out of college, one of 1,000 pro players that he's had, and he still took the time to, he actually called Tripp and was like, you need to sign this. And he's, yeah, I know, don't worry, we're going to sign her. But yeah, I just think just being around him, the kids say, oh, aura, right? That's the thing these days. Coach has aura. Like he just has this aura about him and this fine balance for me. Like I had obviously lost my dad a few months before, and he didn't try and become my dad, but I knew he was there if I needed that fatherly figure. But he also was more than willing to kick me in the butt and say, Amber, like this has to be better. That's not acceptable. He's just honestly a genius when it comes to soccer, but also he just knows like how to coach. Like coaching is an art. And I think a lot of coaches know the X's and O's, but they don't know like how to actually lead or how to get a response out of a player that's positive. And yeah, I just think for a lot of people saw the wins and the championships, but like they don't see the day to day. And for me, I can text him at any point, and he still watches my game. Even in this league, he's watching. And yeah, for me, it's just there's no other, and it's unfortunate, it's sad, but at the same time, I think again, like I'm so grateful for those years that I had him as my college coach. And then I joked that I took like my COVID spring year last year when I was back training with them, and it really reignited the flame for me to be like, all right, I want to give this a go again. And yeah, so I could speak for hours on him, but there's no other for sure.
Sounds like you had an amazing experience with him. I think you talked about the aura, and I think you talked about not wanting to coach. I think sometimes people that don't want to coach end up being some of the best coaches in the market. I know several coaches that said they'll never coach, and now they're coaching full time, and it's because they ended up coaching their kids, and their kids grew up, and now they are 20 years later and they still are coaching, and their kids are long gone, and they just have that magic like you talked about in them. And it sounds like he curated, you don't like to use the word culture as much, but I would call it the magic environment. His culture is, to me, it's right up there with the word elite. It's overused, but it's creating an environment where players feel wanted and warmth and pushed. And I think not many coaches have that opportunity to actually pull that out of players, because I can name a couple local here, but how long can they do it? And he did it year in, year out, being successful. And I'm jealous that you can just call him up and talk to him. Because it'd be fun to pick his brain. But moving forward in your career, you went over to Germany and played, and you came back to the States and played, as you talked about earlier. So how was it making that choice to leave the United States? You decided to take German as a class and learn German, and I give a lot of props there, and it's not an easy language. And to go over there and submerge yourself in this country for about a year, if I'm not mistaken, and then come back stateside. So how is that, as because you were what, 21, 22 years old, doing this big giant leap, and the soccer culture, how did it change your perspective of the game that we all love and enjoy watching, and then coming back to the stateside and seeing it from that perspective? It's only a year time frame, or maybe a little bit longer, but it's how did it change your perspective, and how did it help you grow as a player?
Yeah, at the time, it was really the only option. At least the WPS folded my spring of my junior year. So going into my senior year, I was like, if you want to play pro, you've got to go overseas. And I didn't have a UK passport, so I wasn't going to be able to play in the English league. And yeah, again, when Bayern Munich reached out, it was pretty, for me, again, I'd traveled so much that I wasn't afraid of being overseas. And I knew it was going to be an adjustment leaving UNC anyway. So for me, and again, there was a couple of Americans already over there, and they had a pretty like multicultural team anyway. There was players from all different European countries. And it was, as much as it was Bayern Munich, like on the men's side, the women's side had only just become fully professional not too long before, and they had finally committed to challenging the top teams. So I think they finished third or fourth around the table. And so for me, it was pretty easy decision. That, of course, like a week before I signed, oh, the NWSL is going to start, and I'm like, what is this? So as much as there was like, oh, but I was like, oh, a draft, yeah, it sounds cool, a draft, but at the same time I was like, what do you mean I can't like choose my team? That was just bizarre. Like, I know there's not as many but imagine not being able to choose what college you go to. There's just so many things that I didn't like, that I didn't have control over. So I was like, you know what? And I also think I wasn't thinking this then, but now I look back and I'm like, if you want to play overseas, like doing it when you're younger is the way to go, because as you get older, like you naturally have more ties to where you want to live, whether it's family and friends, whatever. So traveling is really all I did. So I was like, sure, what's the big deal? Go over, live in Germany. And yeah, it was, again, the hardest part was even though it's or Europe, and then Germany specifically is all about their football, like all my teammates were, and it was fully professional, but they all had other jobs. So we would train, like lift at 7 in the morning and then train soccer at 7 at night. And then in between, like my teammates would have part-time jobs. And those of us internationals didn't, because we obviously couldn't work another job over there. And so if anything, it was a bit lonely, like during the day, and I had to pick up random hobbies because, I'd finished my degree. And so that was a bit strange in the sense that soccer has been a part of their culture for so much longer than it has been in the US, but it was almost like even then wasn't what you would say fully professional. And that's changed, obviously. But so yeah, it was, if anything, it was maybe just a bit lonely. But in terms of soccer, it was again pretty seamless in terms of Bayern's used to accommodating internationals, and we had German class twice a week. We ate at the cafeteria that overlooked the men's training field, and Pep Guardiola had become the coach. So I went every day and watched the men train and was eating lunch, and they want you to immerse yourself in the German culture. And because I was playing defensive midfielder, I had to give commands about the press and stuff, and I was expected to do so in German. Again, I was glad I had learned some of the basics, but then I took the tutoring pretty serious. And yeah, it was really just a great time. I think it was great for my development. And again, I felt like my hand was forced a little bit to return to the NWSL. And then even after that first season, the NWSL season was 7 months long. So I had a chunk of time, and I actually was reached out to Bayern and they're like, yeah, we'll take you back. And so I actually wanted to sign a full, I didn't dislike my experience in Portland, but I think I had recognized, I think what was better for me as a player was being in Germany. And I wanted to sign a full year contract. And I thought I was free to do so. I thought I'd only signed a 1 year deal in Portland. Lo and behold, all the deals back then were one plus a 1 year option. And that 1 year option was not a player option. It wasn't even a club option. It was a league option. So it was the league's way of, again, keeping the players in the league. So I was only able to go back on loan for the first half of the season. And it really stunk leaving too, because they ended up winning the league that year. And I put it on my resume, like I won the German league. I only helped for half the season. And then in that time, I'm back over there and I'm really enjoying myself and I'm trying to make it a permanent deal. And I get traded to Western New York out of nowhere again. And I'm playing on loan, and the coach like calls me. That was like, again, everyone over there, the coach and my teammates are like, what do you mean? What is a trade? And then they're like, what do you mean you didn't have a say in it and you didn't even know about it? And I was like, yeah, I know, like American sports for you. Yeah, that was just, again, I think, not that it's a regret, but if I could have looked into the future, I would have definitely played probably 2 full seasons there. But again, would I have this regret of maybe I didn't latch on to the national team as a full-time player because I didn't come back? So it works both ways. But yeah, I absolutely loved my time. When I left, I was right at the point where I think if I had stayed a few more months, I probably would have been fluent in German. I went to all the men's games. They won the Champions League that year that I was there. I saw them play Arsenal, Barcelona from second row seats at midfield. And you were just like, you felt, again, things have changed. Like it's more professional even now, but you just felt like in America sometimes, oh, I'm a pro women's soccer player. And they're like, didn't know we had a team. Like over there, it's, oh, you play for Bayern. There's a real sense of like pride. And again, not that I was treated like some famous person, but yeah, it was just like, it's just a part of their daily culture. It's not looked at as like a side thing or like a thing, oh, like for entertainment on the weekends we'll go to women's game. It's just a part of their culture.
That's definitely different of an environment. And the more I have learned about soccer and how it's set up here in the United States, the little frustrated and disappointed I get as a parent watching kids grow up into it and the rush to get into it as at the professional level. Looking at it from your perspective, because you played it, and I know that there's been some minor tweaks and changes because the Super League came along and disrupted a lot and really making everyone look twice at everything. How do you feel the future for women's soccer in the United States is moving? We have Emma Hayes as the women's national team coach, which is awesome to watch, and watching her as a trailblazer as herself in the women's game and doing everything she has done. How do you view the future of the women's game in the United States and the direction it's heading as someone that's still currently playing and hoping to stay within the game in the future?
I think just the fact that the full team held a camp with the, call it under 23s, which I had done in my day, and there was like zero association, no overlap. I think that right there is a positive sign. It's obviously been trending. I feel like I fell within the years of when I was a teenager or right out of college. It was all about the veteran players, and it was like you had to prove yourself and you had to be better than a vet to get on the field as a professional player, but certainly to get invited to national team camp. And then you've seen over the last 5 years, maybe even longer, this shift to all of a sudden it was like we almost skipped a generation or two of players, and it's like trending toward, oh, can we get these teenagers on the full team as soon as possible? I think there's a happy medium there. I think there's always going to be those generational talents that should be promoted and should be brought along faster than a college player or a 1 or 2 year pro, but I think it's maybe a little too heavily gone toward the youth side. Yeah, I think, again, it's great that there's 2 professional leagues in the U.S. for younger players if they want to play in. They obviously have different avenues and rewards and consequences and all that. But yeah, in general, it's great. Like, I think having a coach that knows that they have to win now, but is also keeping an eye on development and wanting it to not just winning this World Cup or this Olympics. It's cycle year after whatever, 4 years after 4 years. So yeah, I think it's only positive. And again, it's just great that there's these different avenues, right? Like there was really only one. And I think a lot of players got lost in that if you weren't on that avenue. And now there's so many ways that you can reach the top level.
As you're looking back and reflecting on everything, how do you feel as a player that the few contacts that we have in common speak very highly of you and have a tremendous view of who you are? And looking back and realizing your trajectory and where you're at, what advice would you give a young lady or parents that are trying to get their kids to understand trying to get to the avenue where they need to go and the things they need to do to be an Amber Brooks of the world, to have that? You mentioned, and I'm going to highlight this because it's something that parents have to understand, and I wholeheartedly agree. And this is something we preach to my son. I'd rather have a player that gives me 80%, 100% of the time than a player that gives me 40%, 60% of the time and gives me the other flash in the pan, the other 25% of the time, whatever it may be. You're talking about that consistency in the grind. What advice would you give? Because you did that. You said that you did that. I bet it was more than what you give yourself credit to, because you're still playing and you're still playing at a high level. What advice would you give parents and players that are listening to this, looking back now on your life?
That's a tough one because again, like things have changed just so much that I feel like I'm probably considered a little old school in what I would suggest. But yeah, I think first and foremost, like as a parent, like it's your job to raise your children with a set of values and standards that encompass everything from respect to hard work and discipline. And I think if you can get those right from an early age, and then I think allowing your kid to find what they enjoy doing. Like my parents put me in all the sports. I had to play musical instruments. I was involved with church group stuff. So they wanted me to be well rounded, and they knew that inevitably something would stick out. And again, I think too, like really preaching that academic side of it too, because so much of what I wanted to do in soccer was only going to be possible also all along academics. And I wasn't going to be able to miss school to go to these camps and to visit these countries and all this if I didn't take care of the school side. So it wasn't like, oh, you have an excuse for not doing well at school. It was, they went hand in hand. And I think that really helped me again once I got to the college. It was just something inside of me that I wanted to be best at both of them. And then yeah, I think again, looking at it as like you're a facilitator, so have those conversations. Again, I told you about a few that I remember having with my parents, and of course there were times where I was being a brat and stubborn, or I didn't like soccer for this week, or didn't want to work hard. And there was always times where we reevaluated where I was and where I wanted to be and what my goals were. But really, the time and the money that they put into making sure that when I had decided that this is what I want to do and devote my childhood basically to it, they were able to provide that and always seek whatever environment would be best and pay for all the private trainers and for me to play on this club team and go on this trip. So I was very fortunate in that sense. But I think too is always looking at challenging me. So I had a lot of great coaches that were like, okay, it's great that you're one of the best, but you need to like, it's nice to be comfortable, but you need to challenge yourself. So they would never, I remember joining a team, and then 6 months later, this national team coach was like, you need to go join this other team. You're too good for this team. Like you're good, but you're not pushing yourself. So you're not going to be better. And I was, being a girl, I wasn't very happy that I had to leave a team so quickly. But looking back at it, like it was, again, the right choice for me and what my goals were. So I think finding that balance between, as a kid, you say you want these things, and then as a parent, being able to provide them, but also checking in and making sure, because things change. And yeah, for me, it was just a combination of how I was raised and then my experiences, and I had enough positive ones mixed in with enough moments of, hey, you need to be better in this, and enjoying that challenge. And then, yeah, just a lot of great coaches, I think, that, again, unfortunately, I don't know how many there are out there anymore that have the same philosophy. Everything just seems to be about win, win, win. And we wore orange t-shirts, like was our uniform. Like we didn't have uniforms. We didn't have Nike, Adidas. Like they were camp shirts that our coach had left over that we put a number on. And we went to the national championships. We won states and regionals every year. So by working on, like, focusing on development and all of us individually reaching what we wanted next, we ended up winning, but that wasn't the priority. We didn't care about going to all these flashy tournaments. So again, in that sense, I think things have changed. But yeah, I think just it's hard. I don't envy any parent. Certainly one in girls and women's soccer, the landscape has changed so much, and I think it's going to continue to change, that it's hard to know. Again, it's a positive that there's so many different avenues now. I don't think there's necessarily a right or a wrong. I think it depends on your child and their goals. And when I was growing up, it was pretty simple. Like, you wanted to play at a D1 college, and you hoped there was a pro league when you graduated to play in, and then you hoped you were good enough for the full team. But yeah, it's that pros and cons of the shift that's happened, and the fact that women's sports, women's soccer, look, there's 24 pro teams that girls can play on in the US. And when I was growing up, a league folded every 2 years. It's just, there's so much more opportunity, and therefore there's that many more ways to get there.
And now my favorite question. Who has been the greatest influence? And because I think you have a dynamic role in your current career that you're in, and you have some amazing people. I'll be honest, was Googling as I'm sitting here so I could figure out some stuff to ask. But who has been the greatest influence on you as a player? I know you don't coach, but you do coach a little bit from the sounds of it on the side, and moving into hopefully your next big role as a GM somewhere, someplace great, and hopefully playing a little bit longer than, so we have more time watching you play here locally. Who has been those greatest influences along this path for you?
Definitely my parents, obviously. And then I think I'll even reference my wedding in the summer and two people that I made sure the wedding date was on a date that they could come. Let's put it that way. I only had a month, but within that, I was like, can you be here? Which of these two dates? So my high school coach, Bill Hockey at Pennington, I think, not so even much as a coach, but as a young adult or a teenager becoming an adult, he had a huge influence on me in terms of, I think he taught me a lot about, like, humility, and about, because again, I was the best player at high school and I was really good academically, and he taught me a lot about how to be grateful for it all and how to still be a team player while also being this individual star, I guess I would say. And he was always adamant that, like, I would score 4 goals a game and he'd get interviewed and he'd be like, yeah, I thought our defense played great. Like, he was never going to be like, oh, Amber. So I think he made sure that my head didn't get too big, and also showed me a lot of love, and kind of in that time of transition from high school. And then obviously already talked about Anson. And I think, again, as a coach, and obviously that's what he was to me first and foremost, but even if I think he wasn't my coach and just was someone that I had been around a good bit, and I think you could ask maybe coaches of other sports teams or players on other teams that have went to UNC or been around him, or even just had conversations with him. Even Tripp will reach out and have a conversation. And here's this guy. He doesn't know Tripp. He knows Tripp through me, but he's willing to engage. He just wants the world for women's soccer and for his players. And so obviously on the field, and I think I was very fortunate, again, that I had a lot of coaches that were very encouraging, but, like, he showed, I think, everyone in the environment that, like, it's okay to compete like crazy. Like, it's okay, especially as a female, to bust your butt and go and want to beat your opponent, and you don't have to apologize for being competitive. And that's what I'd been all my life, and for the most part it was celebrated, but there was moments where, Amber, like, don't go so hard. So I think having him like encourage that mentality, especially as a female, was really encouraging. And yeah, just like the core values and everything that he brought to UNC just really set the foundation for even now looking at some core values that I want to have with my family in the future. Yeah, probably those two.
Hey everyone, I hope you all have enjoyed this week's episode of Chat by the Pitch. Sitting down with Amber was such a treasure and a blessing in my eyes, and what she shared about her soccer journey and everything she has done up until this point, and there's so much more in her future. I see it. I really do. And I hope you all will go and check out Dallas Trinity in their next home match and check out their information. I am telling you that they are some of the least expensive sporting tickets you can buy in the Metroplex. They are practically giving it away, in my opinion. And you should go check them out and support your local women's team and USL Super League. And take some time to digest what Amber shared. There's so much there and so much to unpack. And I never got a chance to fully unpack it with her because I couldn't keep up writing notes. I truly enjoyed this interview, and I truly wish her the best in her future, and there's so much more there for her.
Hey everyone, if you guys have enjoyed this podcast, have enjoyed what I've been trying to do, the messages that I'm putting out there, please give me some ratings, some stars on all the podcast sites that you listen to this on. Give me a review, share this, share with others. The more I can make this grow, the more I can continue doing this. I'm really trying to make a difference in our soccer community. So I hope you guys have enjoyed all this. And until next time, I'll see you at the pitch.